The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are of those individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, concordant body, appendant body, Masonic Authority, or craftsmanonline.com.
Welcome back to the Craftsman Online podcast, the only Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge of New York. Hey, how's it going? I'm your host, Right Worshipful Brother Michael Arce. Ooh, we're going to get into some Irish-American history just in time for St. Patrick's Day on this episode. But first, big thanks again and virtual hugs to all of our Patreon subscribers. Oh man, you are the fuel that keeps this rocket going. $5 a month, you get ad-free episodes. Plus, you get access to our full back catalog of subscriber extra episodes, which this week will feature our guest who's on this episode of the old podcast. And again, when I say you are the rocket fuel that propels what we're doing, you've bought into the mission. We love you for that. Our job here is to try to connect Freemasonry with those who have an interest in doing it, and your support makes it all possible. You can start your free 7-day trial by opening up your player, click in the episode description, and in the show notes, bang, there's the link to join us, or just find us on Patreon at Craftsman Online. Very rarely do we ever have the perfect guest and the perfect holiday lineup the way it does, but man, that experience as a past master and this thing called a trestle board and a calendar, they do come together as powerful working tools. He is the current sitting master of my lodge here in the nation's capital, St. John's Lodge, number 11 in Washington, D.C., and we'll be talking the 1798 Irish Rebellion. You're familiar with the American Revolution and how that just kind of touched off the spirit of independence throughout Europe. We get more with our guest this week, Worshipful Brother David de Hosson, a first-generation Irish-American. Welcome back to the Craftsman Online podcast, my brother.
Well, thank you very much, Right Worshipful. As always, this is an exciting opportunity. I always love chatting with you. I know this is our third podcast. It is an honor and a privilege to do this, so thank you once again.
Absolutely. Yeah, and before we hop into Doc Brown's time machine, because we are going to literally be going everywhere, all the way back to 1798, but we're also going to go back to December during your installation,
Yep.
because it ties into, as you talked about, like the pride, the passion, and the patriotism that exists in your family coming over to Ireland. I do want to talk a little bit about your military experience as well, and where that has taken you throughout the world. But I wanted to touch first on one of the special gifts, and we always talk about how St. John's is a family lodge, because literally, if you go back to the lineage of our lodge, we had brothers and family members, fathers and sons that were serving as masters at some time. And then most recently, our current lodge secretary, Worshipful Brother Anna Trivedi, is your brother-in-law, and presented you with a very special gift as master that brought a tear to your eye that evening. Can you tell us a little bit about that unique gift?
So my mom is American, and my dad was Irish, and I'm American because of my mom. So my brother and I were born in Cork. Came over when we were little kids, and being Irish is just. It was continually instilled in us as kids and something to be proud of. I was probably an early teen when I was last asked, about having an Irish accent. So by like 13, I really kind of completely lost it. But, it's something we would always go back and visit family. So my grandfather was a Mason under the, Provincial Grand Lodge of Munster, the Grand Lodge of Ireland. And my dad just decided not to become a Mason, but, always hearing stories about my grandfather, his experience, especially when he passed, and some of the brothers of his lodge looking out for my grandmother, a widow, and her son. It made an impact on me, and being Irish is something I'm proud of. I wore a saffron kilt then at my installation. The hat is a caubeen, the little cape, just a traditional hat that has a history going back centuries. So yeah, and I only wish my dad could have been there. But it was just something. I wanted to make a point of showing off my Irishness. In during my installation as master. Worshipful Brother Trivedi and my sister-in-law connected with the Grand Lodge in Dublin, and they were able to dig up the records about my grandfather, when he was raised, and just all the documentation and proof of him being a Mason. And they framed it all, a whole bunch of documents, and it was very powerful to actually see that, because that was something, as we would say, I put on the long finger that I always wanted to look into. But just never kicked off the process, I guess, between our grand secretary and that grand secretary. But just to have that, connection to my grandfather, his masonry, and just seeing him being referenced as a master mason, it was very moving, for sure.
I thought it was the coolest thing ever, because we just thought they were going over there to drink beer and watch Steelers football in Ireland.
Yep, I totally.
The look on your face when you saw your grandfather's handwriting on the line of the ledger of the lodge that he signed as a Mason. And now, being young and hearing these stories, but now having gone through that yourself as a master Mason. And then, hopefully as a worshipful master of the lodge, bringing in a new brother this year to our lodge, you'll see how this tradition and the fraternity will continue.
Yeah. I mean, this is something, we're more than just a social club. And, there's this mystical body that we're all connected to. And, this is something that goes back, hundreds of years. And so for me, there was that personal connection, but also the connection to the wider Masonic community, our brethren in Ireland, in England, beyond. So the internationalness of it, if you will. So for me, there's that personal connection, but also it's like, that connection beyond our Grand Lodge, beyond our lodge. So yeah, very, just amazing.
So I've often joked on the podcast that you have to be a little bit of a history nerd to really enjoy the Masonic experience. So get ready to nerd out with us, because that's what this episode is going to be all about, the history. We've examined Freemasonry kind of as a fraternity at a very high level, at least here in America, as it was perceived back in the beginning, the founding of our country. It was kind of a fraternity, an organization for elites. The higher end of society would be a part of it. What was Freemasonry like in Ireland during this important time?
Masonry in Ireland. So there is the Grand Lodge. We all know the Grand Lodge of Ireland. It's established in 1725. At least that's what we're led to believe. What actually happens is Richard Parson, the first Earl of Ross, he's installed as the first, he's installed as a Grand Master in 1725. Now, that is taken to be the start of the Grand Lodge, but there's no documentation that says that the Grand Lodge is established 1725. It's just taken as such because there's no surviving documents beforehand. What we do know is that Parson is installed because supposedly his family had a deep connection to Freemasonry. So that's why he's installed as a Grand Master. But we're actually probably looking back at Freemasonry, even in its speculative form, predating 1725 by many, many years. So we know that from what was going on in Northern Ireland. But after 1725, there's just this huge explosion in really a burst or several bursts of and expansions of lodges across the country, really kind of coming down from Ulster, taking root in Cork and Dublin. So there's these bursts in the 1740s, the 1750s, especially in the 1780s. There's a movement, the volunteer movement. Part of that is supporting the Parliament in Dublin, pushing for further reforms, greater parliamentary independence, trade reforms. Those are attained in the 1780s, but this volunteer movement, it's basically militias that were formed during the American Revolution as defense in case there's a French invasion. Each of these militia units, these volunteer units, has its own lodge. kind of what we see with the British Army. These traveling lodges, British Army units that would have a traveling lodge with them, typically under the Irish Constitution. So it's again that 38th Regiment of Foot in New York, that British Army unit under the Irish Constitution that actually initiates our brother, worshipful brother, Prince Hall. But so there's this huge expansion in Ireland. So these volunteer unit militia, lodges. Then in the 1790s, there's a further expansion. Part of it is the kind of political dynamic in the country at the time. But by the early 1790s, there's 94 lodges in Antrim alone, 46 in Down, but many hundreds across the country. The interesting thing, though, is that it really includes so many Presbyterians, Church of Ireland Protestants, but Catholics. So our Presbyterian brothers form the majority of lodges in Northern Ireland, but across the South, in Cork and Dublin especially, Catholics, Roman Catholics, provide many lodge brothers into the community. I don't have the exact percentage, but it's typically understood to be fairly significant across lodges in the South and the East. So it's Masonry in the 1700s is, multi-denominational, cross-sectarian, and it really it informs some of the political energy. We'll be talking about that, but it really kind of shows, ultimately it's that brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God, just all these different faiths or really Christian denominations within the same community kind of interacting. And it's probably one of the few spaces where men of these various faiths, of these various churches, so Presbyterians, who are sometimes during this time referred to as dissenters, Church of Ireland Protestants, and Catholics, they're engaging together in dialogue and communion, community together. And it's not happening really anywhere else in Ireland but Freemasonry.
As I'm hearing you talk about this and the buildup of lodges and men who are seeking Masonry and becoming Freemasonry or Freemasons and Freemasonry spreading and sharing and integrating into all of these parts of society, the military, the government, just the common person, right? And I'm sitting here going, what was going on in the world? There was something major that was going on in the 1700s. There was this big movement of independence and freedom and kind of the breakup of the colonial system and the imperial system that we're kind of used to now. What was it like specifically that kind of led up to this 1798 rebellion that was happening in Ireland? Like, what was that? And what was the outcome of this?
It's really the Age of Enlightenment. And now the main group behind the rebellion, it's the Society of United Irishmen, the United Irish Society, aka the United Irishmen. They're sometimes referred to as the children of the Enlightenment, but so are Freemasons. So it's all these ideas of liberty, freedom, republicanism, small r republicanism, but seizing or at least having a seat at the political table, and having a say in policy, in the social and political, cultural affairs of what's going on around you. So you have in Belfast. So Belfast at this time in the 1700s, it's not the industrial city, the shipbuilding center of the 1900s. It's the home of the linen industry, and that's set up by French Huguenots, Presbyterians coming in from Scotland in the 1600s. And of course, they're bringing speculative Freemasonry with them. But Belfast at this time, it's unlike the capital. Now, Dublin is a true European cosmopolitan capital at this point. But I would say Belfast is the heart of the intellectual movements of the time, especially radical, liberal, but what would be called radical thought. And you have the the great works of the Enlightenment, Voltaire, Diderot, Rousseau, all of whom are Freemasons, funny enough, all coming in and circulating around bookshops in Belfast. And I would say that the population in Belfast, and it's really because of that Scotch-Irish population, it's hyper-literate, well-read, connected to the affairs going around the world. So they're reading the latest news, what's available on the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the rights of man, that bringing an end to absolute monarchy in as it took root in France, but fighting for independence and freedom, fighting for individual liberties. All of this is kind of informing political discussions in Belfast, especially, and it's influencing Freemasons. Ben Franklin is hosted in Belfast. He's also hosted in Dublin in the early 1700s. But it's when he visits Belfast, he's welcomed. And now this is actually before the American Revolution kicks off, but he already has that reputation preceding him. So he is welcomed with open arms as someone who's also concerned about liberty and the rights of man. And of course, also a Freemason. And part of it is so Freemasonry really, it's, kind of operating alongside of debating circles and political salons and social clubs. So it really, with these many hundreds of lodges that took root across the country, it really becomes just a part of society. So many men, again, all faiths are joining lodges because it's also that kind of mutual benefit and relief society. But it's bringing community, and there are community activities associated with lodges. So it's just kind of part of the social fabric eventually. So, I'll say that a lot of Freemasons played a really kind of key formative role in what happens in 1798. Part of it is because they just, these are men who are Freemasons because Masonry was just part of Irish society, especially urban society. And there are irregular lodges too. It's believed that one of these other groups, it's an agrarian kind of self-defense group, the Defenders, it's believed that they may likely have been an irregular lodge.
I think our Revolutionary War, as we celebrate America 250 this year, it's a very timely conversation. I think it was 1793 was 1783. Sorry, is when our Revolutionary War ended. But then we went through this whole struggle of trying to stand up a federal government and get a constitution with Bill of Rights and all of these things passed. And I mean, that took another 10 years after that. But as you kind of had mentioned, I don't want to say the fallout, but the bloom of independence and liberty had definitely shot off. And I remember reading about one of my favorite stories, Thaddeus Kosciuszko. There we go. It just rolls right off your tongue, that guy. Good old Thaddeus Kosciuszko. Missing Masons. He never became a Freemason, but he was best friend to George Washington and, Thomas Jefferson before his passing, and just, this amazing guy. And yet, his action involved with the American Revolution spread, and he went back to Poland and, it did what he did. And so I'm sure all of the rest of the world, as you're saying, is watching what's happening here. And America, again, is influencing the movement of other parts. And then on top of that, as you said, is also this uniqueness of Freemasonry. And what is Freemasonry? It's, a safe place, so to speak, and it has been for millennia for men to come together to get enlightenment, but also connect and grow as a person. So as you kind of talked about and we're familiar with the story of the stone and the operative Freemasons, the practical builders, and some of this was still happening with the Scots and, the building of the temples and the buildings that were happening there. But then you also had just the different type of Masons where you had these very passionate, strong Irishmen, as you're saying, who were able to bring in all of these different religions and cultures. What is your sense of what Freemasonry was like during this unique boiling point? Like, what do you think they were talking about in lodges?
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Again, these are spaces where men of all faiths and all classes are meeting together. I mean, all these social barriers, societal barriers are just breaking down. But it really starts in Belfast, where you have, the kind of social activism among Freemasons. Some of them, work for kind of social justice efforts, but also they're anti-slavery. So huge push among Freemasons, especially in Belfast, abolitionism. And you see them just get involved.
Like America, like really influenced this, and like the revolutionary, as you're talking, I'm like, this is all like America 250 here, like getting all excited. And it's like you look at like our founding fathers. There's obviously the Masonic connection that was going on there, and so you can feel the spirit and the intent, right? But then there's also, as you kind of point out, is like the way that they organized, that they structured themselves kind of like a lodge, where they were using like secrecy and like a form of how we talk about things like Masonically, like networking and, being careful as to who you should be sharing things with and how you talk about things. And can you kind of touch a little bit about that, of like how we see a little bit of it, of course, like in documentation and in speech, especially if you've ever had to go take an oath of office or an oath to be a member of a jury. There's a little bit of Masonry that's kind of present in that moment there. But it's different when you talk about the very conscious decision of like, hey, we're going to try to keep some of the way that our organization operates internally a secret to those outside of it.
And that's the thing. I was just going to mention a quote by William Drennan, who's a medical doctor, a poet. He's actually the first, on a quick aside, he's the first to refer to Ireland, William Drennan, as the Emerald Isle in his poems. But he writes to Sam McTeer just weeks after this writing by McCabe. And he says to Sam McTeer, I should much desire that a society were instituted in the city, meaning Belfast, having much of the secrecy and somewhat of the ceremonial of Freemasonry. So these are all Freemasons talking to each other. A benevolent conspiracy, a plot for the people, no Whig club, no party title, the brotherhood, its name, the right of man and the greatest happiness of the greatest numbers, its end. Drennan and these men, they get together and they actually meet in 1791 at Peggy Barclay's tavern. So typically Masonic lodges would meet in pubs, taverns, inns at this time. And so they get together. So McCabe, McTeer, Nielsen, and they meet with two other gentlemen. I mean, they're famous in Irish history. Thomas Russell, a British soldier from Cork, and the very famous Theobald Wolfetone, a barrister, Church of Ireland man, barrister from Dublin. He's wrapped up in the Catholic Committee. He's pushing for Catholic liberties and rights. But they get together, all of these gentlemen, with other Freemasons, William Sinclair, William McCleary, Henry Haslett, William Tennant. They're all from Lodge 257, that same lodge I mentioned. John Campbell from Lodge 636, and they form the Society of United Irishmen. Weeks later, then, William Drennan, meets with James Napper Tandy, another figure famous in Irish history, and Archibald Hamilton Rowan. They're both Freemasons. So Tandy is coming from Lodge number 190. Archibald Rowan, he's coming from Volunteer Lodge, one of those militia units I mentioned, Lodge number 620. They're all Freemasons, and they form basically the Dublin branch, along actually with other Freemasons, Matthew Dowling, John Stockdale. And they form that in Dublin at Taylor's Guild Hall, where also the Grand Lodge of Ireland is also meeting at the time. So I wouldn't say it's all coincidence.
It's so like parallel to what was going on in America just 20 years before this. Like, it's crazy.
and that's the thing, kind of looking at the academic work during the bicentennial. So, they, I think, very purposefully look at, kind of establishing this organization, and it's focused on reform, the rights uh, of advocating for the rights of both Catholics and Presbyterians primarily, but it's very self-consciously modeled on the lodge system. So the United Irishmen, they do engage with different artisan guilds, political clubs. Kevin Whalen noted, 25 years ago in his writings that they do purposely engage with Masonic lodges. Jim Smith noted that, they considered, as I mentioned, kind of Masonry as this microcosm of the wider society that these men envisioned, just something founded on mutual respect, breaking down barriers between unnatural, barriers, dividing men. Thomas More, the great poet from Trinity College, noted that, when someone would be invited to join the United Irishmen, they would be asked to join a lodge. So it's very purposefully the lodge system. It's secretive. The men can be counted on, and you have United Irishmen spreading ideology through visitations.
I guess this is a great place for us to end, because you end, or you conclude your lodge program on this note. You say, quote, "the effort to reclaim this past," end quote. And so listening to this story, is this past that you're talking about and reclaiming it, is it the spirit of unity? Is it the combination of, men who are like-minded, who are being bound by different parts? Is it the fact that they believed in something so strong and so passionately that they put their lives on the line for it, believing in something bigger than themselves? And even to the fact that they didn't accomplish, they didn't triumph, but they still found a way to survive and in some way keep carrying that flag forward. What is the past that you're hoping to reclaim here?
It's funny because at the bicentennial, the Grand Lodge invited the president at the time, Mary McAleese, to visit the Grand Lodge, and they showed a lot of the artifacts still in the possession of the Grand Lodge from 1798. And they, were proud to show the role of Freemasonry, rightly, in the rebellion. And again, like, the lesson is of this, when you see injustice, speak up. When you see, something wrong, whether, and again, these Freemasons, they're speaking out against poverty. They're speaking out against slavery. And then they see the unjust laws in Irish society against Presbyterians and Catholics together, creating this elite, by taking away the rights of the vast majority together of the country. But yeah, I guess for me, it's, reclaiming that sense of there was a time 200 years ago plus, and a quarter, where Irishmen were together, in common cause, fighting for justice. It becomes this bloody conflict, but, advocating, at the start peacefully for justice together, in Ireland for all her children. But yeah, this is a history that wasn't always freely taught in the North and in the South. And I think only now are people really, thanks to the internet and other sources, where they're really starting to see, like, hey, this is what this rebellion was really about. Unfortunately, it took this path, but it started out this way, where it was a coming together of men of all faiths, men and women. But again, we have and Marianne McCracken, Henry Joy McCracken's sister, was an activist in her own right and involved with Freemasons and abolitionism, So it really is men and women, I should say. But, the focus, here being on the Freemasons, it really is this everyone kind of advocating for a better society in the country, in the kingdom.
Big thanks again to my guest this week, Worshipful Brother David de Hosson. If you want to hear David and I continue the conversation on Irish Masonry, the 1798 Rebellion, and just Freemasonry in large, make sure you join us on Thursday for that subscriber extra episode. Ooh, not a Craftsman Online Patreon subscriber? We can remedy that. Click the episode description, and in the notes for this podcast episode, you'll find the link to start a free 7-day trial of Craftsman Online on Patreon. If you join us for $5 a month after that, we thank you for your support. I'm Right Worshipful Brother Michael Arce, already looking forward to next Monday. We'll be teaming up with Brother Jorge Aguilar on his latest article, Transformational Leadership in Contemporary Freemasonry. Yeah, leaders wanted, be listening next Monday. Until then, let peace and harmony prevail.